afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. And since the organizers haven't given us a break of 5-10 minutes, we are continuing with the discussion. And I think most of us has listened to the last session just recently got over, and mostly around community-centered connectivity initiatives we heard. And I think our session is also connected to an extent because at the end of the day, I think we are under the umbrella of community network exchange, community network ecosystem. We are discussing the relevance, the challenges, the evolving dynamics that is also coming up. Just a quick intro. I'm Dr. Syed Kazi, and I represent Council for Social and Digital Development. And we work largely in the northeastern region of India, which borders China, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Myanmar, and down towards the Southeast Asian countries. And of course, we have Gustav. I think we are very, very familiar with the work that you do, Common Room Foundation that you're doing. And we have Setu, yes. Setu is a bridge in English. So he is a bridge between the connectivity and the communities. And he represents Internet Society as an advisor. And we have Michael. Who doesn't know Michael? I think many of us we know. I think most of us. And all of you, I think, this is not a structured kind of a prepared discussion that polished questions and throwing and all, but it's just a discussion that we'll be having in the next 40-45 minutes that we have. And all of us sitting here, especially the resource persons here, they represent communities, their different culture, different dynamics, countries, context and challenges, and evolving. I think every year, every now and then, the experiences are also changing with the connectivity. The dynamics are changing, the policies, the regulations, and the needs. And all of us here sitting here, I think, they represent something from the other side of the ecosystem, that is from the bottom up, community-led, the challenges, the needs and requirements, and comes with an experience they have worked on the ground. So while I was going through the concept note that was shared by the organizer and of course our colleagues at DEF, the title of the session was "We the Community, Why We Can't Own Our Own Data." And then also there were certain summaries of points that it was mentioned. So I was thinking, what is that, what we can own, what we cannot own? Because it may be quite revolutionary also to talk about that we own the data, we need to own our data and all, because that will also go contrary to what the government policies, the government is trying to improvise the system, the network, and the policies, and so on and so forth. So that those kind of thoughts was evolving in my mind, that what exactly it would actually mean. So what I inferred from the session brief was that two kind of two kind of dimensions that I just thought. One is that one could be that why cannot communities can have their own community networks which are legally sounded, vetted, approved, recognized, so that they can have their own data, they can have their own development agendas, they can have their own freedom to work, use technology, and pursue their social economic aspirations in their local ecosystems, whether I think it's in economic aspirations, the digital economy, and so on and so forth. That is one inference that I did from the topic. The second aspect is that in a situation when everything is getting digitized, every service is getting online, And there are platforms now where we need to also get into those platforms to avail our services. It's obvious that we need to register, we need to log in, we need to share our data, and that is where we need to also be part of that platform economy to get services. Otherwise, don't share the data, don't get the service, because service dimensions have also changed. Earlier, especially in the global south, the government was the biggest service provider, whether it's health, education, anything you name it. But now the whole system has shifted. The whole service ecosystem has moved towards the private service providers. Private services are coming up, and the role has been shifted in the government to the other side. And with the coming of technology, the internet, the platforms, certainly this is all the getting more overwhelming. So if you need service, just log in, give data, and get service, and don't cry. Otherwise, don't just creep around. We have given data, what is happening to our data, and so on and so forth. So my second inference, I'm just summarizing it, that when in such an ecosystem, when we need to register, to get data, to get services, to get into the platforms and get those online services. So what happens to our data? The question in many of our minds, oftenly we discuss, is that what happens to our data, whether our data is violated, data is being hijacked, data is being captured, we are being played against our own data. So those are the kind of discussions we just often hear, right? So these are quite a little contradictory kind of an understanding, even for, I think, because these discussions are still evolving, because platform economies and all. And also with the coming of AI, when the large language models that we talked about, where the data is the kind of a factor of production. Earlier, there were three factors of production: land, labor, and capital we used to talk about. But now I think data is the new factor of production, if we assume that this is a consumerist society. So these are some of the thoughts that I am carrying here, and also just wanted to share with all of you and also with the audience sitting here, that. And based on that, so I had just put certain questions, frame certain questions, and 5 questions, of course, and I just want to throw these 5 questions to each one of you, provided we have time. But in the sequence that we will start 1, 2, 3. If time allows, we'll get back to you. And secondly, I think if you can also give examples from the references from your societies, from the area, geographies, from the countries, that you can give certain examples. So now starting the discussion now. So I'll start with, of course, Gustav first, because he's sitting at a distance. So we need to hear first from him. Thank you, Gustav, from coming from Indonesia and joining us. So again, I'll go back to the discussion that in the immediate last session, where Enrit and Sony and other speakers were saying. I think they were talking about community-centered connectivities and all. So consider that universal access is important. Countries recognize that, number one. Second is that now the WSIS Plus 20 review is also nearing towards that formalization in the New York and so on and so forth. And all these discussions are happening, in fact, where connectivity is also part of the discussions and all. So that is another part. The other aspect is that considering that access to network is a public service, is a right, because without that, survival is also impossible, is difficult in today's context. Also, that the contradiction between community-centered connectivity or consumer-centric connectivity. So these are all in this kind of a narrative, that how do you think that community-centered connectivity is relevant, extremely relevant, not relevant in today's context, in the midst of the government of a country, the industry, the network providers, the private parties are being pushed to connect. So how do you see this push versus the need for community-centered connectivity? Because the more we talk, we don't also get the response coming from the government, or especially from the government, that there is a need to recognize community-centered connectivity, because everybody should have their own ecosystem, of course, within the legal framework. So I think the question to use this, if you have understood what I'm trying to say, Gustav.
Okay.
All these things versus the relevance of
Is quite a lot,
yes.
and is challenging questions. I will try to give a brief interventions to stimulate further discussions on this. I've been working in past years to develop a community-centered connectivity initiative in Indonesia. During COVID-19 pandemic outbreak, of course, there are a staggering exponential necessity to provide equal access to internet from urgency to emergency level, because internet access is somehow essential not only to provide access to information and daily communications, but it's important to maintain the lifelines of a lot of people. And in the past years, we have also seen after the pandemic, there has been a decrease of interest in providing equal access, especially for people in rural and remote areas. And we need to reframe this interest, because in Indonesia, provide to provide access for people in rural and remote areas is important in order to address not only the development gaps, but also the growing challenge and complexities in the surrounding of climate change. So in these regards, we have been working, and after working for several years, we have also learned that data sovereignty and ownership is also important. But we, I don't know why, I think it's not only technical matters, but also political matters. In Indonesia, data ownership among communities tends to not really in the interest of our governments at the moment. In the last discussions we have, is quite strange why they need to protect the interest of big companies in allowing these companies to extract and interpret data for their own purposes. So for this, we have been learning that somehow there has been a staggering split or a rupture of paradigm on the development of internet and digital technology today. In the early days of internet, we have seen internet as a protagonist agencies that bring lights to democracy, human rights, innovations, and freedom of expressions. At that time, nobody cares who owns the data. You exchange and share data as a common goods, which is quite interesting how it impact our life at the time. I still remember back then in 1998, I was still a student and actively engaged in student movement for democracy. Sharing data platform is somehow very important for democratic movement back then. So, but in recent years, we also seen that internet is become an antagonistic leviathan when it comes to personal data violation, extractions and exploitations, as well as hate speech, hoax news, disinformations, etc., which also include illicit digital content and harmful algorithms. So this algorithm extracting data for many different purposes, including to kill people in some countries. In short, internet and digital technology currently has a tendency to become, in Indonesia we use term raksasa. I don't know in India you familiar with this word. Is a demonic creature that generally depicted as antagonist, representing chaos, evil, and forces that opposite a benevolent god or deva, and making interventions to cosmic order somehow. And this creature also possess shape-shifting ability, because data is becoming a very abstract and not really easy to understand. Illusion casting, that is why in Indonesia we call internet as dunia maya. I don't know it is also familiar for you in India, but somehow that is how we understand internet. And it also have immense physical strength, like global operators. They have the power to navigate and control almost everything, including our data. And Raksasa is also able to eat human with their greed, anger, and violence, as they symbolize a darker aspect of human nature. So in Indonesia, we also see internet and digital technology indeed pretty much instrumental to the rise of new awareness of human rights and democracy, but in the same time, it contributes the birth of authoritarian regime and shrinking of civic space when they control our data. And this was also follow a widening and deepening digital divide when it comes to new and emerging technologies like surveillance technologies, artificial intelligence, and et cetera, et cetera. And as we currently know, internet and digital platform are no longer become a safe space for everyone. And in this regard, I think we have to find our way out from the belly of the beast with policy advocacy, training and capacity building on technical skill, digital literacy, and critical thinking to ensure that safeguard of just equity and accountability of internet and meaningful access and connectivity for the future of internet. So we need to bring all of this to bring back the internet to the community, by community, and for the benefit of community. So I think that this is something that somehow relevant to our discussions today.
Thank you, Gustav. We heard those loud and clear, and I'll come back with the next set of questions. I think Setu, I know you are the bridge now. So same question to you, that universal access, then the right to connectivity, good connectivity, and also the relevance of communities-centered connectivity as a solution, and vis-a-vis the community versus consumer-centric connectivity push that is also happening. So in this whole paradigm, how do we see that the community has the right or the need to have this community-centric solution so that they don't have to struggle again and again, because they need to get good connectivity to also address their various needs and dimension, especially those who are unconnected, not well connected. I think over to you.
Thank you. I think I'll start with building on your point on the idea of internet being a force of good initially, and how it was treated as commons. And it's funny that now how the internet has evolved into platformization. The that idea of tragedy of commons, which was a physical concept, has moved to the digital space from Elinor Ostrom. So, but the tragedy of digital commons is slightly different from the regular commons. The idea was that commons is collectively owned by the people, but now in the current space we are in, it is data which is generated by the people is rarely owned by people. The data is generated here, but the value is derived elsewhere in a very different way, very different format. But the underlying point that you mentioned is community centered connectivity, if you want to give ownership of data to people. So the question is, who owns the infrastructure, who controls the infrastructure? One of the interesting things here is that one of the largest data centers in Asia Pacific is here in Hyderabad. I think it's run by AWS, not too far from here. But the idea that the data centers, the infrastructure, the connectivity systems are owned by specific few corporations limit the potential of having ownership of data with the communities or with individuals. So in that way, community centered connectivity becomes a backbone of any kind of data ownership which you want to have with the community. But that being said, infrastructure is one aspect of it. There are other aspects like political will, which Gustav also mentioned. It's not just technical; it's also political. So it's also about political will, regulatory understanding. In the previous panel, one of the speakers mentioned the case of Brazil, where the regulator has created a working group inside the regulatory body to have meaningful connectivity and community-centered connectivity. I think these kind of regulatory pushes would also enable movement from consumer-centric connectivity to community-centered connectivity. And we have seen these kind of examples coming out scattered all over the globe. But then there is also a synergy with resistance to platform lock-in with infrastructures which are owned by specific corporations. We've seen resistance to data centers rising all over the world, including in Brazil, where indigenous community in the Amazon regions have said that no more data centers by Amazon or Microsoft here in our region. Similarly, in parts of Europe like Marseille, which is the biggest connection point, one of the biggest connection points for Europe, has been resisting data centers built in their city so that they can have control over the infrastructure. So there are different kind of solutions towards moving from consumer centric to community centric, but yeah, I think they require collective solutions from all ends.
Thank you, Setu. So we heard you, and I will get back to you. I think same question: universal access, community versus consumer-centric connectivity, and the relevance of community-centered initiatives, connectivity initiatives. How do you see in this evolving ecosystem?
So just quick words. I'm representing an internet service provider and connectivity related solution provider. We work in 11 states, including in Telangana, including very close to the data centers you mentioned, which are about an hour away from here in a place called Moinabad. I'll unpack the question in the following way. First of all, I urge all of us to simplify the problem. We're talking about digital, and we tend to get mired in the jargons and the lingo. These are old problems with new appearances. Ownership of resources, rights, it's an old story. So it helps us all, I think, to first of all simplify it. Second, I want to talk a little bit about, you framed it in the beginning, but said like, who owns networks and who owns data? Okay, let's start with who owns data. If I have another minute, I'll talk about networks. When we talk about data and data extraction, again, I urge us to try and be very specific here, because when we think about data extraction, in my mind, we're talking about four relatively close to each other types of data. The first is what I call incidental or residual. Data that we derive by just browsing, driving in our cars, and so on and so forth. Shoshana Zuboff, who wrote a brilliant book about the internet, called it slug. Okay, it's a byproduct. Slug is a byproduct of production of coal. Okay, the second is consequential. Again, residual products of our behavior, say in shopping websites and things like that. Data is collected by that. We're intentional about what we're doing. Data is collected not necessarily with our direct involvement. The third is generative. This is data that is collected or generated by things like IoT. Think weather stations, think seismic early warning systems. These are things, by the way, that Erjaldi does. Think of webcams. We're talking about privacy. Let's talk about webcams that every municipality in India is installing for the benefit of whom exactly? The fourth one is creative. This is stuff that we create intentionally ourselves. It could be a web post. It could be a comment on Google. I like T-Hub. I'm going to give it 4 stars. I like my Uber driver, and so on and so forth. And actual creations that live online. When we look at these 4, we need to, again, as communities or as people talking about communities, need to be very mindful of what is feasible and possible. I think for the first 2, there is a really big issue. Okay. Um, these are things that are very minute. For us to monetize them doesn't really make much sense. So the question then becomes one of how do we talk about consent? And when we talk about all of these four, the really important thing in my mind here is to remember a very simple principle. If I've collected data for A, can I use it for B? And the answer with ownership of data is basically you shouldn't be able to do that. That's one of the biggest arguments in the European community right now with the big tech companies. Okay, Facebook collects data on my behavior in WhatsApp and feeds it into its other platform. Google collects data on my movements and I visit the physiotherapist 5 times a week. Does it find its way to medical companies? These are extremely important things. On the third and the fourth, the generative and the creative, that's where we can generate real economic value. And the argument is raging out right now exactly about that. Unfortunately, creators are right now losing. I don't think it's going to last for long. I think that the pendulum is going to swing backwards. A quick word about networks and ownership. We've been at it for many, many years. As you said, we know each other for many years. When it comes to ownership of data, of networks, let's keep in mind the levels of complexity of ownership of something. Okay? Again, if we have time to talk about it, definitely yes. But whenever we talk about communities owning, what is the cost of ownership? And what is the cost of me releasing some ownership while keeping something that's dear to me?
Thank you, Michael. You mentioned the data parts first, the data extraction, and the misuse also. You mentioned for economic reasons. So my next question is, of course, in the first round, we try to understand the community-centered connectivity, relevance, and need. And the second set of question is that while everything is happening, for example, in India, the platforms are coming in, providing us services. Government is sitting on that as a kind of a custodian, as a kind of a trustee. That because government has now given the market has been open now that private players has to give services, and government is there to protect us. Government is there to protect us with regulations, with protections. Recently, we have this Data Protection Data Act, Digital Data Protection Act. So government's role is that. And also within that umbrella, these agencies who are these platforms and the service providers, they are also supposed to work under those guidelines, under those regulatory instructions. And there are mechanisms that if something is violated, then certainly you will be pulled up, you'll be disbanded, you will be, you'll be punished for whatever. Those kind of mechanisms, grievance mechanism. And so those features are already being laid out or conditioned out and all. Of course, we may have a mitigation measures also going to the court, appellate tribunals, and so on and so forth. And so in that context, there's the other sort of fear that we are discussing, the kind of concerns, not fear, the concerns that our data is being misused, privacy is being misused, is used for taken for A, used for B purpose, and so on and so forth. So I just sometimes feel that are we thinking on the right way, our concerns are the right way, or our concerns are not reaching to the government, or government hasn't been able to understand our needs, because these are all evolving, because in the last 5 years or 10 years, these things are evolving. So in that context, my question to all of you will be that in this context, how real and this fear or this in this data driven world, how real is this concern that our data is being misused and all, number one. And number two is that whether the existing mechanisms The regulatory part, government part has been weaker enough, not being strong enough to protect us. Because again, I'm saying government is the protector. Government is the custodian of our welfare rights, of our needs and all, and of our concerns, our needs and our protection. So in that context, how do you see this fear of being our data being misused or being, controlled, used against us, and so on and so forth? So how do you see this whole thing?
Well, in Indonesia, we just launched our data protection bills last year, and it's kind of a fog situations because in one point we are happy that our government have this concern and awareness to protect our data, but in the other side, there has been a lot of case of data leakage and cases where personal data has been abused by many different actors. Like for example, just recently there is this a young woman who just lost a lot of money in her saving just because the data has been leaked and being used by those who don't have any authority and stole all the money, and we don't know where to go because this is becoming a common issues and daily problems. And I think it is important to understand there are a certain level and needs to protect our personal data because data can be used and misused by many different actors. And one thing that is also quite important is that in Indonesia, you can go to jail when you and be criminalized if you use climate data for public goods, for example. So this old regime and understanding of utilizing data as a common goods is still an ongoing debate, and we have been working with communities in rural and remote areas for our community center connectivity initiative, using remote sensing sensor to collect microclimate data, so we can bring back this data for decision making at the local level. But still, at the policy level, it didn't allow us to use that data openly. But in the other sides, we quite amazed how big corporations can openly use climate data for their own purpose and benefits, and why at the community level we cannot use that data for our own interest. So this is, injustice and isolations, and a vulnerability in data protections, which cause a lot of problem for many people, is still a big issues in our countries, but maybe also in many different countries.
Thank you, Gustav. I think you also highlighted certain governance aspect, data governance aspect, and again, this is also an evolving field, and probably there will be a lot of gaps, and a lot of things to be improvised upon, the measures and the mechanisms to be strengthened when you go forward. I think Setu, I think same question. Do I have to repeat? I think. Do I have to repeat that question?
No.
Okay.
I think the idea that the government is supposed to protect us in the has taken a more paternalistic view in some countries, including in India, where governments have tried to um, ambitiously regulate, particularly recently when it comes to data privacy or other similar issues. In fact, just yesterday, the Indian Digital Personal Data Protection Bill released their operational rules, which basically made it effective. So while on the one hand, at least we have some protection, there were larger concerns raised by uh, many people in the ecosystem that the bill is lacking, the act is not robust enough. But there is always a debate when it comes to these kind of regulations, is that on the one hand you want to protect individual rights, community rights. On the other hand, you don't want to hinder the innovation. So innovation needs to keep happening, businesses need to keep growing while also protecting. So it's a slippery slope. Um, it's a ongoing and continuously going debate whether the rules need to be more strict or not. Uh, what what Michael mentioned in the earlier intervention about the debate in EU as well. It's the similar debate that whether the Digital Services Act or Digital Markets Act needs to be more stronger. Similarly, India is also trying to do the same things, but from our own perspective. And this is not just in India, as we heard; it's also happening in Indonesia and many other jurisdictions. Um, one of the things that you mentioned when you gave the context for this question was there's also judiciary involved in these kind of decisions. Just I think a few weeks ago there was a decision by Karnataka High Court here on blocking Meta to transfer their data, sharing the data between Facebook and WhatsApp for at least 5 years. So it's a moratorium. And while more policies and rules and regulations are being formed about this kind of data sharing within the ecosystem, there's also antitrust implications, there's competition implications. Because I think I mentioned it earlier in my previous intervention that the platform lock-in is becoming a bigger issue, and all of these can have implications for privacy uh, and protection of consumer rights. So yeah, it's a complicated solution and
But
answer.
again, but again, a quick thing to you is that don't you think that since these laws and provision, the rules have come up and all, the rules that you mentioned yesterday also it has come out, and the judiciary intervention example that you give, don't you think that we should also give some time because this is evolving, because we still don't know what's going ahead, because you can only correct or strengthen when there's certain leakages or certain drawbacks are happening. Assuming pre-assumptions, a lot of pre-assumptions could also may not be lead towards a good data governance framework, perhaps. So probably, don't you think we should also give some time and let it go on the ground, let it come up. The reactions will come from the people. It'll go to the the litigation things and all. Those things can be strengthened further.
I mean, this is a larger question on the policy cycle, that how long it takes for policy to react to the ongoing situation. But as you said, it's an evolving situation. So I think we need to have something, and then it needs to keep evolving. So waiting around is probably not the best idea. Having something is better than having nothing, is my personal opinion. Um, but yeah, it's an evolving ecosystem. You're absolutely right. But I think it's better to have something than nothing. Yeah.
Michael, I think same question. I think your reflections.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, in terms of data protection in India, let's be quite clear. The rules are extremely strict. As an internet service provider, you are not allowed to share data, and it's enforced very, very strictly. So if anybody thinks that somebody sits there and milks your data as an internet service provider, you're probably wrong. But we're looking at two additional aspects. One is the government, the other one is the tech companies. And here, I think I want to switch the question of responsibility from the collector to the user. Somebody used the word consent, and I think it was you said. People go on a platform and they consent. The minute you consent, you're taking part in this exchange. And this is where we really, again, as users, really need to put the focus on terms of ownership and loss of data and abuse of data. And it goes to this, again, the word education. Is a user informed? Does the user know? Okay, there was an old saying in America once: "What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas." The new version of it is: "What happens in Vegas stays on Facebook," and we need to remember that as users. So again, We can talk about policies, and government can be benevolent or less benevolent. The responsibility is also with each one of us as individuals.
Thank you. So since we don't have time, but please just take not more than 7 seconds. And my third question was on that. Now, large language models, AI-driven, data-driven economy. So I think that is quite very super fast is happening around all the whole global. I think the whole countries are competing, companies are competing in the like nothing. Every day we see the news and all. So in this wave, which is going very fast, where does the citizen fit? Where does the citizen fit as a consumer, as a producer, or a shareholder? So I think quickly.
I think this AI boom is distractions. We should uh, still focus on capacity building, education, and building the critical thinking to increase engagements and awareness among society and especially in communities to bring the internet back to community.
Well, thank you. So, Setu, I think whether citizen can be a consumer only, remain a consumer, or a producer, or a shareholder.
I fully agree with Gustav that it is a distraction, but yeah, I think the community and every individual has all these different roles to play. I think we should keep striving for them to have a voice, individuals to have a voice through thinking about alternative models of data governance like crowdsourced data commons or data trusts where people and individuals have right and voice to say how their data is being used.
Amazing tool. Learn how to use it, not a replacement for critical thinking. Plato once opposed the use of written books because he said it harms memorization. It does. But do we want to stop reading books? We don't. We want to make it part of what we do.
Thank you all the speakers. I think any one or 2 points quickly we can take, any perspective that you may have. So I think I will stop Pranita to bother me, but any 1 or 2 points, any perspective that you want to share, yes.
I personally feel that it's a huge concern. The kind of data protection bill that we have amongst us right now, especially in a kind of authoritarian reaching world and regime that we currently live in. So I want to ask the panelists, I mean, how important it is to actually frontline this, the politics of this data regulation.
Politics of data regulation. Anybody?
I think it's very important. I think our government currently is really keen on collecting more and more data and using that data to make our lives better, quote unquote. So I think it's definitely very very important to talk about the politics and what is the subtext behind collecting all this data. And you're absolutely right. It is not a bill anymore. It is now an act, and it is in force, and it has major viable concerns about individual rights, but also collective rights as of marginalized groups and groups which can be scrutinized by the government. But it is, of course, a larger debate to fit in a 30-minute discussion.
Thank you. Anyone last? Any perspective? Okay, Pranita, if you can help, you can throw the mic from here. I don't know. Yeah, just.
Hello, myself Paul Said, and as we talked about this right to privacy, etc., kind of things, can we say that these right to privacy, all these kind of things, are only myths? I can say, and in the real sense, the right to privacy or etc. kind of things are dictated by the capitalist class of the society, and they are not only invaded the right to privacy, but also I can say frame the choices on behalf of us.
Can you just repeat? I am not clear. Are you clear? Okay. You have a question or you're sharing a view?
No, it's my question.
Question.
Yeah.
Please repeat that question.
I talked about this right to privacy. That this right to privacy is not ours own. I can say it's a myth, as per my opinion. And in the real sense, this is invaded by the capitalist class of the society, and they are not only invaded the right to privacy, but also frame the choices of ours. Do you think it's yeah?
Okay.
Actually, this is as per the Karl Marx concept.
Karl
Yeah.
Marx. Okay, we know.
Bourgeois and the proletarians, and also Noam Chomsky, who said, and also Noam Chomsky, who said that media is dictated by this capitalist class, and they are framing our choices, extra kind of
So
things.
he is against capitalist, so
Yeah.
he is a Marxist.
Yeah, I think
Sorry.
in regards to this new digital landscape and the rights to privacy and data protections, I think there has been an increasing necessity to have this cognitariat idea that people who have a cognitive ability and technical skills to understand what is really happening in this new digital landscape. And again, educations, I don't think that state power have the ability to navigate and regulate everything, but smart citizenship and cognitariats is, I think, the key for the future.
I think in New York and some other city recently got some socialist mayors and all. So yeah. One more question, last question.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Asim, a law student. I have a question that if data is created by individual, why it is not recognized as a property?
Data is of individual. Why it's not our property?
Regarding the protection laws. Regarding the protection laws.
Protection laws. Yeah.
Keyword. What's your name? The guy who walked back. Asif? No, it wasn't Asif.
Asim Kabir.
Yeah, Asif. Keyword consent. Okay? If you sign a document, a contract that says that you give your data, you consented. If you disagree and you don't join the platform, they don't own your data. आपका choice ये भी है.
Has anyone
So we
ever
are
read
not-
the privacy notice ever in full? Yeah. Yeah. That's the answer.
So we are being made lost, get lost or go lost. Thank you so much for patient listening. Thank you for your time, for your observations. I think these discussions need a lot of time, the days and days of discussions. But finally, I think what I feel also that, of course, you may agree, you may not agree, that we are still evolving these dynamics, these contradictions, the conflicts of even understanding the laws, provisions, and the rules that has come in. So I think in the next 5 to 10 years, perhaps these societies, the economies will have better rules, regulations, and we will certainly should have mechanisms even to contribute to strengthening these safeguards. Because again, I am saying that government is the custodian, because otherwise why do we choose a government? So that is what ultimately we rely on the government to protect us and safeguard us from all this hazards that is, we anticipate will also take our rights, privacy, and whatnot. I think with those words, thank you so much.